Amazon space for a little over 11 years. I started out wanting to work for myself. I was living in China. I had a great mentor that was one of the first private label people making millions of dollars. I met him working in Shenzhen.
You're not going to share the infinite commerce secrets to me right now. I always like to observe the different types of companies out there and learn a thing or two.
I had some of my own products I was selling at the time. This will take you way back. I don't know if you remember Amazon selling machine.
One, two, three.
Welcome to the Smartest Amazon Seller Podcast. Very excited today. We've got someone that has, seen a lot of different very large organizations in Amazon, their Amazon arm. And the good news is he has like zero things that he's selling other than just like a good time. And so I have with me Josh Justice, who has worked with one of the largest supplement brands in the world on Amazon, Nordic Naturals. He's worked with Lego, and he's currently working with Infinite Commerce. And the reason that I was like, let's just chat, because like Infinite Commerce was hiring, and I was like, oh, this is a good time to grab you, because you know what, maybe someone out there, I do have a lot of Amazon agencies that listen, and maybe someone that's looking for their next opportunity can look over at Infinite Commerce and see what they're up to. Interesting, a little bit of an interesting story there, but Josh, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it.
All right. So just tell us a bit about your journey. I'm going to ask you some questions about Lego, because they're probably one of the highest name recognition brands in the world.
Right.
And a lot of fun, a lot of nerdy stuff, and even Amazon sellers love Lego, a lot of resellers, the hobbyists out there. So I'm sure it'll be interesting, but just tell me about your background.
Yeah, so I've been working in the Amazon space for a little over 11 years. I started out wanting to work for myself. I was living in China. I had a great mentor that was one of the first private label people making millions of dollars. I met him working in Shenzhen, almost worked for him, and it didn't quite work out. And but anyways, he became a mentor. I had some of my own products I was selling at the time. This will take you way back. I don't know if you remember Amazon selling machine. But that's how I learned, was through the Amazon selling machine, when it was called that. Now it's like amazing.com or something like that, or amazing selling machine. So I really learned how to do everything. I was living in China. I sourced the product myself. I took my own photos because I had great camera equipment. Went to the packaging district in Shenzhen and like sourced the packaging. Like I literally did everything, learned how to do ads. So made enough money to pay rent in China, which back then was pretty cheap, like $300 a month. And it really just opened up the door to really everything in my career. I ended up not selling it after a little while, because I had to move back to the US and the MOQs got really, really high. I had a baby, and so I kept it for a couple years. But it opened the door. I worked for some smaller companies. I worked for a really big agency that was well known at the time called Marketplace Ignition. It got acquired by WPP, and it's turned into so many different names. One was Wunderman Thompson, and then most recently it became part of VML, which is a really big agency. And some of those same people that I work with are there.
So it sounds like you followed along that agency. So WPP, I think, is one of the world's largest agencies. We're talking this is the agency of agencies. And they obviously have a service line of just about anything you can imagine. What's it like for an agency to get scooped up into a worldwide, does it kind of, I guess my main question is, does the identity still stay the same? Are they still an independently branded agency, or does WPP just swallow it all up and source some of their internal brands, be like, oh, you guys, we run this now you run, now we can do your Amazon stuff?
Yeah, so it was pretty cool. So it happened shortly after I joined the organization. So it was super exciting. Man, there's so many levels to that story. So first of all, I got hired by Ryan Douglas, and me and Ryan were actually chatting on Reddit about Amazon stuff. We were talking back and forth, and he was just like, "Hey, like we could use some part-time help at this agency." And I didn't know what an agency was. I knew the concept though because I was trying to do it myself. I was like, "Hey, if I just got some of the 5 of these really poor paying Amazon jobs here in LA that want to offer you 35 grand a year, if I just got 5 of them to give me 2 grand a month, like that's 10 grand a month." So I didn't know there was actual agencies that did this. So he's talking to me about this stuff because I was asking him for advice. And anyways, long story short, I get this job at Marketplace Ignition. They don't have their brands plastered all over. And as soon as I start, it's like some of the world's largest brands that they're helping with Amazon. It was like Anchor, I think it was not a full-time client, but back then I think we did some consulting for them. We did projects with Nestle Purina, Henkel. I think we had a Coca-Cola brand or something. And so I kind of stumbled into this amazing opportunity, and just like world-class consultants that work there, people that were also super nice and willing to help me level up my understanding. So it was I walked into that, right? And then 2 months later, it's like, hey, we're being acquired by WPP. And WPP owns, I want to say off the top of my head, 200 different agencies. And so they wanted us with that Amazon expertise to be like the Amazon Center of Excellence that could help all of the different agencies that needed help. And so basically Marketplace Ignition basically ended, and it became part of another agency called Possible, and then another one, I forgot the name. And then that got all put under Wunderman Thompson 6 months later. So then we were Wunderman Thompson by the time I left. And then just recent, I think it was in January or late last year, it became part of VML, and they got rid of Wunderman Thompson. So I guess going back to the original question is it was pretty amazing because we already had really big brands. And I would say back then it was Marketplace Ignition and CPC Strategy were kind of the 2 really well-known agencies.
CPC Strategy has evolved into its tenuity now.
Yep, exactly. So
a few acquisitions there, man. These agencies, they like to get acquired. They like to do things. They like to rebrand, all the things.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not because it's just like a services agency. It's actually very easy to do some of those things. You
can start it with not a lot of capital, right?
Right. I know, I met people that, I was just chatting them about that first agency model that you were talking about. They're doing it. They scoop up a few small clients, and for them, it's hey, this is double the money I was making doing, and anything else.
That's why so many, I've met so many people over the years, and not everyone, but the majority of people are either trying to side hustle on the side to build up to work for themselves, or, almost everyone I know, including myself, has given it a shot. So
I think the American entrepreneurial dream has just in the last 10 years, I mean, who doesn't want to work for themselves in some capacity, or has at least entertained it seriously for a few years? I know people that have left and tried something, come back, whatever. But I kind of, honestly, I've got 30, 35 employees for Smart Scout. I think half of them, they see what we're doing. They're like, I want to do something like this.
I think it's inspiring because what I learned at Marketplace Ignition was I came from the seller side. We had a lot of vendor accounts, and it's the same skills you need to grow a small brand, you can use to help make a bigger brand bigger or improve that brand, right? That's where it was really amazing because I would see oh, here's these huge brands that need our help, and I can help them. Or I worked with people with really amazing experience, and so I could see the gap in my skills and knowledge and what they knew and what they had experience in. It was really inspiring working there.
Interesting. Okay. Wow. We didn't even get you. We didn't even get you 25% of your journey. The next steps, very interesting. Did you go from there to over to Nordic Naturals?
No, I worked for a smaller agency. So at Marketplace Ignition, I'll just call it that. I started out as a specialist, and then I started learning more of the analyst skills, and then I became a part-time account director where I had a few accounts, and I like the account director part better. And so my next role was at a smaller agency, and I was an account manager or account director there. And I stayed there for a year, and it was kind of like the brands were a little bit too small. And I realized between those two experiences that you can only get so deep on the agency side. And sometimes you can't really control the brand you're given as well. Like there are some brands where I was like, I do not want to spend my life helping these brands, right? And so I was like, I really want to work in-house. My goal was to find a brand that makes the world better in some kind of way, or brings people joy, or just something that benefits, right? It could be something that makes people happy. It could be something that is healthy for you, like a supplement. And so I really just was like, okay, this is my North Star. I don't know. I don't have a dream brand to work for. And so I got fortunate with Nordic Naturals. I was freelancing, working on projects for a few months, waiting to find the right one. And in the meantime, it was like, I kept getting all these interviews for agencies and almost getting offers. And I just said, you know what? I need to, if it takes me a couple more months, really find a role I want to do in-house. At the same time, I was looking at what's needed in our industry. And I had experience with Amazon ads. And I just thought, if I can become an expert in ads, like I had a good experience, but later on, 5 years down the road, if I'm an expert in ads with that experience, and then I'm more of a GM, that's going to help me just manage a business better, manage a brand.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
I got fortunate. I got exactly what I was looking for.
Yeah. I remember when ads came out in 2016, boy, did I not really know where it was going.
Yeah.
And from both a skill and a technical perspective, and even a brand building perspective, it's kind of like you said, for you and for many, that is Amazon for them, is like the promotional part. Okay. So, was it then Nordic Naturals?
Yeah. So then I got into Nordic Naturals, and honestly, I wasn't into supplements. I knew it had a good reputation. And it's another one of those like pleasantly surprising things in my career where I started, and I would tell them where I worked and they would like rave about it. And I'm like, I've not seen people so passionate about supplements. And so it's just really, it's a great brand to work for. We were talking earlier about James Gosling was my manager there.
I'm going to have James or his partner on the podcast, like literally in the next few weeks.
Oh, okay.
So we're setting the ground for that.
Yeah. So that was a really cool job, and it was an amazing experience because my budget grew significantly, like within 4 or 5 months. Started out with like a decent sized budget. I needed to restructure like a whole bunch of campaigns my first couple months. And then things just took off and my budget grew. And so it was a great experience of like, okay, how do you prioritize products, right? You got different tiers. Even within those tiers, like at least the top tier, like you need to have a structure of like, here's my top 5 products. Here's my top 13. So it was a really fun experience. And James was absolutely great to work with. He started, I think, a couple weeks before COVID. And just, it was a really awesome team to work with. Man, seriously, it was a really hard team to leave.
So I'm not sure if I've said this on the podcast. Once I made this post jokingly talking about like the different Mafia families of Amazon selling. And you've actually already referenced like a few. Amazing selling machine, kind of like, like started out the top. You got a few of the key figures, and how many people come from that DNA. I know the person that got my brother into Amazon, and I ran across someone the other day. Like it's kind of like he created his own Mafia family, and in a way, I might be creating my own Mafia family as like I've done like a conference and a software. So people that just like have really like learned some of the ropes from someone else, and it actually kind of makes it a small world. I could go off and name like many others that were like there's some intertwining of people like moving companies, whether they're like reseller focused, advertising focused. There's just this like these interesting weaves that kind of make it a small world. So it's so funny that like I didn't know that you had ever worked with James, and like sure enough, like here you have. And okay, well, let's jump to the main brand that everyone's heard of. Lego. What was that like? Did they just have an opening for an Amazon advertising expert?
So, I haven't thought about this process in a really, really long time. And I was kind of sitting around just thinking about like things to talk about. And I was like, man, there's a lot of things I haven't thought about. Well, so I was pretty happy at Nordic Naturals. We had a great team. We were tight. It was in the middle of COVID. James had talked about like there was a position opening up that would be a promotion, and he was going to recommend me. So I was pretty happy. And I was like, yeah, what are my favorite brands? It's like Lego and Nike. And, I've always kind of posted content on LinkedIn, and there were a couple of times when I posted some stuff about Lego, some cool merchandising things I had seen on Amazon, and just for fun. And it like must have triggered some kind of algorithm, because a job at Lego came up in my feed and it said search marketing manager. And I'm like, what does that mean? Like I've never searched, maybe it's a West Coast thing, but I'm like, I don't remember people using that word. Anyways, I looked at it and it was like the same job that I was doing. So I was like, oh, this is like a lateral move. Like, I don't know about this. So I saved it for a while. Someone from Lego posted it and said like, hey, if you're interested, let me know. So I messaged them, and they called me, and they're like, actually, this role is not just this role, but like we need somebody to manage this small team like within a year, because somebody's going to be leaving, like moving across the world. I was like, so they're like, it's not just a lateral move. I was like, oh, okay. Well, that changes it. So I applied, and I'm like, it said it's open to remote, but I don't like this is now we're in a post-COVID world with return to office and all this stuff. But I'd been working remote for years. And so I know how it is. If somebody says in office or remote, they really would prefer somebody in office. And so I looked at where the office is. So this is between Boston and New York City. I'm in California. For sure, they're going to, I'll just apply, I applied. I got, anyways, I got a bunch of interviews through it. And every step of the way, I was just like, if I make it to the next round, great. If not, I understand how these things work, right? So somebody would rather have somebody close by. They just said like as soon as COVID quote unquote ends, it's quarterly visits to the office, which is pretty normal. Nordic Naturals, I would fly up to Northern California once a month. So it was great. It was fun. Of course, James didn't know about it. But me and James would talk about Legos all the time because we were buying it and, putting sets together with our kids and talking about it during our meetings. And then like eventually I got to this place where I got an offer, and it was pretty cool. It was a long process. It was about 3 months. And so I got an offer. I felt like $1 million, man. Like they gave me a signing bonus. They said like, we want you to lead this team within a year. And at the same time, my baby was due right after the start date too. So it was like kind of, I didn't know if I really wanted to leave because we had really good parental leave at Nordic. And so I was like, I have to say yes to this job. So anyways, I accepted the role. And this is a funny story that I posted in that group once before in that Slack group, but I hadn't got to meet James in person yet. And so he came down to Southern California where I was at, and we were meeting up with our kids to have lunch. And I needed to give him my 2-week notice. So, but we were meeting for lunch in a couple of days. I was like, I got to tell him in person. I can't do this over, I got to do this face. So we meet up. I brought some like Lego toys for our kids to play with. I forgot where we went to dinner. So you know, I knew James would not be happy that I was leaving. So we're sitting there chatting, and he's like, you should go get a job at Lego. Like, you're so good at your job. I would hate to see you leave, but you should see if they're hiring. And so I just kind of laughed, and I said, James, I actually need to give you my notice because I got a job at Lego. So it was pretty funny. And so it was amazing. That story probably took way too long,
No,
but
it's real.
yeah, I was actually pretty emotional like my last couple of days at Nordic because I felt like our team and our leadership team, we had all gotten really tight. We all really liked each other. We had gone through the first part of COVID together. So it was cool. So I started at Lego, and I sent everybody on my team a bunch of Lego sets, kind of catered to their interests. So I sent them I think we had like 10 people on our team. I sent them all sets, within a couple months of starting. So, but yeah, so Lego was great. I was going to be able to do this role remotely from California, manage this team remotely. So start off really good. And, but then that kind of changed, right? Like a lot of companies change policies because when I got hired, they just said, hey, we're hiring more remote people to get more talent in e-commerce. And then I think maybe like 7 months later or something, they were like, there's going to be no more remote roles. And so they were like, you would have to move here. And I'm like, I can't move my family across the country for like a minimum another year. And even then, like it would have to make sense financially. And so just wasn't going to fit. So I was kind of like, well, these things happen. And, so I just was like, okay, well, I'll stay here another year and just get some good experience.
So now let's just jump for a second, if you may, about like, how does Lego see the Amazon channel? They've got a large 1P relationship, working with Amazon, with vendor. And they also have this big hobbyist community that has led to a lot of reselling happens through Lego, maybe because part of their product strategy is they discontinue a lot. And so that kind of creates that. I don't know anything about how they think and how they think about Amazon. Is it an important channel for them?
Yeah, it's definitely an important channel. And I would say, I don't know where the threshold is where it actually becomes more like a retail partnership compared to the seller community. It's at times feels like a battle and a tug of war with Amazon, right? And there's a lot of complaining, a lot of it justified, right? But it's like when you're a vendor and you get to a certain size, like you have really good relationships with Amazon, even like infinite commerce. Like we sell so much on Amazon that like our leaders have good relationships with people at Amazon. And if there's an emergency, like it's just a whole different level, right?
Yeah. I mean, I've heard with vendor that like the bottom tier brands have actually kind of been pushed away a little bit. The middle tier, they get some attention, but not what they used to. But if you get to the top tier, they're like Amazon will not lose Lego. That would be kind of a big mistake on their end. And so they'll do everything. Yeah. They'll work with them as, they kind of anchor the toy department.
Yeah. I mean, it's just Lego is just a whole nother level of brand on Amazon. That's why when I was saying what's the best brand that I really love that I could work for on Amazon, and it would be Lego because my kids love it. I started getting into it. I just like putting together the different cars and vehicles. But it's pretty massive.
But from a professional perspective, what was it like? What were some of the challenges? What were some of the things that you were able to focus on?
Yeah, so my role was to manage Amazon ads for the US, Mexico, and Brazil. And then manage the SEO for marketplaces. And so, with a brand that big, when you're getting all the product, all the PDPs created, getting all the ASINs created, it's done at a global level, right? So the SEO is integrated into the copy and the A+ content. And, we're not touching that. Where there's opportunity a lot of times is the backend keywords, the title keywords. So on the SEO side, there was not one person that was doing titles for SEO optimizations. You, like any brand, like even at our company, you've got some kind of system in place where you have like a short title, a medium title, and a long title. And, you use different titles for different marketplaces, and, you have a merchandising team that can edit that. Well, then sometimes there would be edits that, we're missing core keywords in it. Like sometimes it would be missing boys or girls or kids. There would be some products titles missing the word toy. There are some products missing the word toddler or preschool. And so there's a lot of opportunities. So things like that, I think at any large brand, there can often be these little pockets of like, hey, no one's looking after this, but maybe nobody really understands the importance of that thing. Like maybe the person that emphasized that thing, like say the SEO, they moved on and like somebody didn't pick it up where they left off or something. So, as big as Lego is, when you're looking on Amazon, what I would be finding is like some of these top keywords that are not a branded keyword, like building toys or building sets for 5-year-olds. Like we had no organic placement. And then I look at the titles and like, hey, like these titles need some work. So it's not like you can just change something in a day when you're at a big organization. So I'd say one thing I really learned through working through these bigger companies, and specifically at Lego, was sometimes you have to pitch and show the need to change something like 10 times before it kind of sits well with people and they see the need for it. And coming from my background, it's like, well, you hired me for this expertise. I'm telling you what needs to be done. I need you to enable it. That can work a lot of places, but at bigger companies, it doesn't necessarily work that way. And I had a really good, a more senior leader that talked me through this, that I worked at much bigger companies than Lego, and was like, hey, like, look, even when I worked at this place and this place, you might have to say it 10 different times. So he was like really encouraging. He's like, I know this is the way you've worked before, Josh, but you got to be patient. So I started getting like case studies that were public, or like asking our agency partners to send me some of their case studies about, hey, we did these keyword changes and, saw sales increase by 15% for this one. And then I would network internally with like some colleagues in Europe that did have this SEO person as a position, and we get data from them. And so I just started showing my leaders like, hey, we really need to prioritize this. And eventually, it took some time and we were able to get it changed and built a playbook of like, okay, for these product themes, like this is like the kind of like the structure we want to use for titles and things like that. So
interesting. I think some listeners are probably hearing, there's a lot of thought that goes into a lot of the different steps, or needs to go into those steps. And it's kind of hard to move everything over just because you saw like a compelling YouTube video, say someone shows like, oh, look at me, I'm using this tool, and all of a sudden, boom, 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 like, and now we're ranking. Like, if you're at a big organization, you're like, you can't just like, things don't happen like that.
Well, and the other thing too is like, there's some things where I could go try to change this myself, right? Which works in a lot of jobs, right? Probably most of the people listening, if you needed to change something, you would just go change it in Amazon. But like, you can't just do that, because you could always be chasing that change. Sometimes you got to kind of suck it up for a little while, and you want to change the system or process so that you fix the process rather than fixing the symptom of a process that maybe doesn't exist. So,
so how did these, Lego's probably a little bit different, but like, how do they view ads? Do they see it as an investment? Do they see it as like just the rules of the game? Were they, do you think they were like aggressive in the category, or were they conservative?
Yeah, I would say definitely aggressive. I would say just like anywhere else, they know the importance of it. They know, to go after unbranded key terms. Like you've got to use ads. Before I got there, they showed that, the impact of ads versus turning them off or turning them really low has negative consequences. So one thing that, has really grown over the years, and like I was there during the part of the transition, is like the digital shelf and measuring your share of voice. It is important. And so when I was at Nordic Naturals, we didn't use software quite yet, but we would go and check our rankings all the time for top products and top keywords. It was a manual process. We were trying to get Profitero, and I don't know if they ever used it, but I was trying to get that deal closed before I left for Lego. But like, we had
well, if they want to pay less for share of voice, you should send them my way.
Yeah, I don't know what tool they're using now, but so I think that was one that evolved where like people weren't super aware of it, and we had a tool that was scraping like once a week. And so I was pitching like, hey, we should, here's some other alternatives. I had one demo. I won't mention it since it's got a competitor of yours that was a really good demo that we didn't end up using, but that I really loved and would mine great keywords and mine great ASINs to put into, PAT or ASIN targeting campaigns, things like that. Yeah. So I think that was something where I was able to help push the importance of that, and like to structure your spend around that as not necessarily a goal, but to track it, right? Like if you spend this much money, you're going to increase your share of voice or your organic ranking. And there was no kind of tracking like that. There was like a couple tests done.
How would it feel when they like would invest so much into products, into some of these ASINs, and then they just kind of get discontinued? It's like, oh, you build up 2,000 reviews, and now Amazon doesn't get any more.
Yeah, well, and I would say that's not necessarily unique to Lego, because other big toy brands face the same thing. There's kind of, you've got like Bricklink, or you have all these sites that kind of say like, this is the estimated end date of these products. And I remember working at Lego and seeing like a lot of these are kind of accurate, right? Because somebody is leaking that info somewhere. But yeah, I think it does. That's why some of those products sell so well, because they did so well and then they discontinue it. I don't know. I think reviews are hard for everyone. Like there was a lot of times where we would have good products and there would be 5 reviews or 15 reviews after like 3 months, and like really a lot of products sold. So I would say the review game, I shouldn't call it a game, but the review challenge is there for everybody.
Well, I actually had someone on the podcast just a few weeks ago who was in the design category. Like they make a lot of like custom design, like think like infographics that you've put in your house, like print out stuff. And his wife did a lot of the design, and he's like, you know what, Scott, like in this category, conversion rates aren't very high, but reviews don't matter. Because people are buying something they're going to hang up. They see it right there. They see like the information. Maybe it's like some education thing. And I almost think Lego could be a little bit similar, that the reviews don't matter as much because there's usually a lot of IP involved. And
there's some products that are home runs where there'd be times where it's like, do we really need to advertise this product? Like it's just doing so well, it doesn't matter. And then you have like kind of the middle tier that might struggle, or sometimes there's just products that I just remember sometimes my demand planner would be like, hey, can you push this product a little more? And it's like, well, this price is a little bit high for what you get. So, I don't know if this one is, if we spend more money on it, I don't think it's really going to solve the problem.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, let's take, as much as I honestly probably could talk about Lego for an hour, because especially when you get into the community conversations of like the people that like have built a lot of like very hobbyist kind of like focused websites and communities. But let's fast forward to infinite commerce. Yeah. So as I understand, one of the largest sellers on Amazon, Juvo Plus, is involved. And it's a combination of a few old aggregators. And the way that you described it to me, Josh, was this sounds like where the aggregator model has kind of like moved into 2024, where some expertise from Juvo, they were a large reseller, then they became a very sophisticated private label seller. I've watched them for a while, and watching their transition into private label was actually very interesting and like really well done on a lot of fronts. And I actually don't know like the motives behind the scenes, if there's any like what the financial implications are. And I bet you very, very few people were, but like there's a few other aggregators kind of combined forces to become Infinite Commerce. Did I get that right?
Yeah. So Infinite Commerce is the joining of 4 different organizations. So the one you first mentioned was Juvo Plus, which I've known for a long time because they've been in my job email feeds for I don't know how long, because they're not far from where I live.
Yeah.
So, and I even interviewed, it was more an informal interview with Juvo Plus a few years ago. So I know their name really, really well. They're not far from my house. And then you got Juvo Plus, you've got Cap Hill Brands, which is an aggregator. You've got Moonshot Brands, which was another aggregator, and you've got Dragonfly, which is another aggregator. And so all 4 of these organizations have all joined together since January. I think discussions started a little bit before January. Yeah, so I joined during this joint effort to combine these companies. And I think it's been great. It's been really interesting. There's so many brands. I think the joke is, can anybody name how many brands? I don't know all the brands because our brands are divided up into different portfolios or divisions. So I manage a subsection of those. So I don't know everybody else's brands memorized at this point. We have meetings and talk about them. But it's really interesting because it's a combination of, if you've worked at an agency, one of the cool things about working at agencies, you get to have your hands on a lot of different brands. You get to learn a lot. It keeps your job interesting. Downside of working at an agency is you don't really get to own the P&L. You're sometimes, making suggestions that maybe fall on deaf ears, but I'll just say that happens everywhere at every job.
Sure.
As well.
But still though, it's different when you're like, you are actually on the same team on every single decision.
Yes. So I've really loved it so far. I think, having worked at other organizations and you come in and you get to know each set of brands or different is, all these different aggregators typically are structured a little bit differently. They all have different strengths. And you just meet people from all these different groups. And it's been really interesting trying to integrate it. Like, there's processes to figure out, a lot of things in life, right? You have a process, then you have a bunch of people go through it and you find out where it needs to be improved. And then you work on improving it. And so, that's what I'm doing today. There's a process I'm working on today and reviewing docs before this call and after. And, but it's been great. We have some really great brands, and these aren't just, brands that people started in their garage and, sold to an aggregator years ago. Some of these brands have been around for a lot of years that, they finally wanted to exit. So I've got some fun brands. I have a brand that is a scooter brand that's really fun. My kids are rolling around on scooters everywhere. We have a skateboard brand, and I have one next to me. It's a one that you can ride barefoot. You wouldn't wear shoes on it. And so I've been riding it around the house. I haven't taken it outside yet, so it's not getting the house dirty, but I'm just riding around the house. So I think it's been fun so far.
That's awesome. How big is the team there at Infinite Commerce? Like,
ooh, that's a good question. I think it's a few hundred people.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
I would say at least 200. I was thinking it was 300 people.
Interesting. And so they're no longer buying up brands. They're more in operation mode. Is that right?
Yes.
You guys launching products still?
Yes. Launching new products is definitely a strategy. I think that's where, eventually, I don't know if, you hear about some of these other aggregators and some of the things was like, hey, we bought all these brands, but then they didn't have a process to launch products very efficiently. So that's true of anything. Like
it's
people
hard.
that I knew were millionaires 10 years ago, they don't have the same products or brands they had 10 years ago.
I think launching products is hard, and not like it's not like a skill that just like you just like train some random junior employee. Okay, now launch us some products.
No, not at all. The people that work on launching new products at the company, like, they're very skilled. They have a lot of great experience at really big brands. A lot of them have been doing it for a lot of years. As you know, Juvo Plus was a top seller on Amazon with private labels, so they are really great at creating products. And that's one of the strengths that we have in the organization. Is
if the founders of Juvo are listening, like, hey, if I'm in the LA area, let's go out to lunch. I want to learn a little bit more about their story, because I think we found ourselves competing with them a lot.
Really?
Not like, we competed with everyone a little bit. So,
yeah.
But just like some of the transitions that they've made, that's what I want to ask them. I don't care about, when we might have been on the same product page, more of like the transitions, why, where, when, because like we talked about some of these transitions ourselves, didn't make them all, but here we are years later, and they've become Infinite Commerce, and I'm on a podcast. So,
well, one thing is that there would be no one in LA for you to talk to necessarily, because there's no office for some of us, right? We've got the warehouse, and there's some people that are dispersed within Southern California. So there's definitely people that work in LA, in Orange County and where I'm at. But if you showed up, we'd be like, yeah, maybe you got to fly somewhere else to meet me.
Right. I'm just having fun. Well,
yeah.
That's very
I think it's interesting too. Like,
how many, one of the things that like started this conversation was, you guys are hiring. Like, what do you guys look for in like talent that's needed?
Yeah. So the job you're referring to is a divisional manager role. It's the same title I have, and I'm one of several divisional managers. And so we have products. Most of us have products divided up into similar categories so that we're staying within the same category. So you're running the P&L. You have great reporting resources. You just, I think for this role, you really need some good experience, like actually growing brands and having that branded marketing mentality. Like you do need to know the P&L. You need to know the levers you need to pull to promote products. Like, do I run a coupon? Do we lower or raise the price? What are we seeing in the market where I need to propose that we create this new product or a new color variation? And so all of us have a little bit similar experiences, but we're all experienced a little bit differently.
Yeah. So it's interesting to see, any company that evolves. And so, you guys aren't going to share you're not going to share the Infinite Commerce secrets to me right now, but I'm going to figure them out on the back end. Just you wait, Josh. I'm going to be like, no, I always like to observe the different types of companies out there and learn a thing or two. And I kind of my comment, I think I see you guys as like, the next iteration of aggregators. And so sounds a little bit more sustainable. No crazy expectations, just trying to do well in the channels.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely is a stable situation. It's not, you're not going to see, some bankruptcy tomorrow and, 100 people out of a job or anything like that.
Yeah.
And we have great people that have experience.
Yeah.
We have people from Thrashio on board. We have people, people that came over from, the other aggregators. So there's a lot of really talented people here.
Okay. Well, thanks for coming on the pod, Josh. It's been great to see your journey, kind of a different path of the agency, brand, Lego, the aggregator of the future. You've been along for it all. So kind of a different story than I usually get for the podcast. So thank you for coming out.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Let me ask you this question. Who do you learn the most from that's not in one of your, that you don't work with?
Oh, LinkedIn feels very saturated, but I've used LinkedIn for years. So I learned a lot from other people on LinkedIn. And then really...
Then who's your favorite?
Who's my favorite? Oh, man. I like John Durkis.
I kid you not. I was thinking his name.
Yeah, because he posts like, hey, here's the stuff that you didn't ask for, but I'm going to give you. And it's like good quality stuff. Like I was reading his newsletter during my lunch today. And I've talked to him one-on-one before.
I read his newsletter yesterday and I'm like, dang, how does he do this? I can't do this. Oh my goodness. He's very smart. And someone I got to get on the podcast. I think I've tried before, but he's too busy.
Yeah. So I would say publicly, I think he's the number one guy right now. I think he's got the credibility too, right? I don't think he's got like a ghostwriter or anything like that. So I think he's putting out the most interesting content. Yeah. And so I appreciate John, what he puts out. There's a lot of people I talk to behind the scenes. Keith Hammond is one of my favorites that we've known each other for a few years. We probably jump on the phone a couple times a month, or at least texting back and forth. I love Matt Snyder. Matt Snyder is great.
Well, those are some names I know. It's so funny that we feel like John's like peaking right now, like he's trending up for sure.
He's consistent and it's different too. Like when you're at an agency, a lot of that stuff, it's great free material that you can learn from. And it's easy to get free material because it doesn't matter if you're giving good secrets out or whatever. It all matters is, are you going to go execute it? And chances are most people are not going to.
Yeah.
So, but that's part of their business and part of their marketing. With John, he's got a little bit of marketing in there. Like his call to action yesterday, if your agency sucks, give me a call. But the info he's giving is, not really geared towards that. But Brett Bohannon and Michael Mayer, we have a group chat. Those guys are great. So yeah, those are some solid guys that I chat to.
Cool.
Chat with
all right.
regularly.
Well, I know all those names. So
yeah, all great guys.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Josh. Excited to see where your career continues, and look forward to chatting in the future. But don't be a stranger, especially if you want to keep sending people Legos. I'll make sure we stay good friends.
Oh man, I bought so many people sets, so many. So
that's funny. Maybe you're going to turn into an underground Lego reseller.
I got a ton that I'm still trying to sell because I overdid it when I worked there. I spent thousands of dollars.
No way. Well, yeah. I'd love to see their internal catalog. That'd be fun. Well, let's wrap up there. Okay. And we'll see you guys on the next podcast, and take care.
1, 2, 3.